Alright, so today we're going to talk about some concepts of child discipline. Before we start, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm one of 6 boys in my family. We grew up, my parents had a very firm philosophy on their thought of child discipline. And so 5 of us boys, a little bit about us, 5 of us boys, you can see us, we can stand sideways, we all have a very similar physical attributes. So you look at us and go down to the back and go straight line down to the legs. So we don't have much filling out in the middle, if you know what I mean. The 6th one, Timothy, you look at him and he goes straight down his back and it curves out a little bit and then goes down to his legs. So he fills out just a little bit more. Remember that fact for here in just a couple minutes. So as we were growing up, there was kind of this running joke that my mom may have had might have gone slightly too far in her philosophy of spanking children. So legend has it she had a certain kitchen utensil that she used whenever spanking her children. Do any of you own a cheese grater by any chance? So, legend has it, she would take us and she would bend us over her knee and she would take that cheese grater and she would whack and pull, leaving behind just a little bit less skin every single time. Timothy, the one I mentioned before, he was considered the good kid of the family. Filled out a little bit more, didn't have quite as much taken off. Now, obviously, that's not a true story. That didn't actually happen, but you kind of get the gist of it. My parents had a very firm belief in spanking their children and their child discipline, and they instilled in all 6 of us boys a passion and maybe even a little bit of a fear for not just following the rules, but learning the principles behind the rules. So I've grown up now, and I've got 2 little girls of my own, and I've worked hard to instill that same passion in those girls. While they can both be a little bit heathens in their own way, I take comfort in knowing that whenever it matters most, so far they have brought honor to their father and mother's name through their actions. So, as we continue, it's my desire to sway the hearts of those parents who do not believe in a firm concept of child discipline, and show the benefits of putting in the work early on to raise a child with a Christ-like character as they grow up into adulthood. So, as we get started, we'll take a look at my 2 main points. First one, we're going to look at the biblical mandates for child discipline that God has set before us as it pertains to this topic. And the second, we're going to look at the difference between discipline and punishment and how that applies to our parenting techniques. So, first things first, we're going to dig into the Word. There are several passages, specifically in Proverbs, that address this issue. The first one, Proverbs 13:24, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes." Now this is probably one of the more well-known verses addressing this issue. Solomon is considered to be the wisest man ever to live, and he speaks very bluntly on the expectations of raising a child to grow up in the ways of the Lord. But an even more heart-wrenching verse, in my opinion, is a couple pages over in chapter 23, where Solomon states, "Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell." The severity of a lack of discipline is put forth very clearly. While there may be pain in the moment, the lessons learned will last a lifetime. Thomas Holler, a parenting and relationship expert, he wrote an article entitled "Biblical Perspectives on Spanking." In this article, he challenges parents to create a Christ-like approach to parenting and to seek strategies and techniques that enable you to parent the soul of a child. He also says in that same article that parents need to stop using the Bible as an excuse just to spank their children, but instead use the Bible to help create a higher vision of yourself as a parent. And that vision needs to have a clear separation between simply punishing a child for breaking a rule and disciplining a child to understand the principles behind that rule. Danny Huerta lists several examples of this concept in his article, "Is Spanking Biblical?" He says that spanking is appropriate whenever a child is in an extremely unsafe situation, whenever a child is being extremely disobedient or disrespectful, and whenever a child is just deliberately defiant of the parent. It's not, however, appropriate when a child is simply just being childish or impulsive. So as a parent, this is a very difficult line to navigate at times, but I think it's one that, if crossed consistently, can lead to separation and distrust from the child to the parent. But I can tell you that as someone who grew up in an environment where spanking was a common form of child discipline, I personally never lost trust in my parents. I never harbored a long-lasting resentment towards them, and I never felt abused. I understood the principles behind why I was getting spanked and knew the consequences from that. My actions were solely on myself. In an article entitled Disciplining Children, Pastor Dennis Finman declares that discipline and punishment, he defines discipline and punishment in an effort to help his audience create a deeper understanding of the concept. So he defines discipline means to teach. It comes from the same root as the word disciple, meaning one who follows to learn from another who is wiser. We know that if a child touches the burner of a stove, he's going to burn his hand, right? We understand that as parents because we've gone through the hardships of life and we understand that concept. It's the same thing whenever you're spanking your kid, right? You use it as need to use it as a moment, not just to punish the child for breaking a rule, but as a teaching moment to learn not to break the rule in the future, as well as learn why the rule exists to begin with. Too many parents use the cop-out answer of "because I said so" whenever spanking their children. You're going to benefit greatly if you take the time to explain the principle behind the rule. Our pastor says very frequently, rules without relationship equals rebellion. And I agree with the concept of this statement. So, looking back, we looked at the biblical mandates that God has set before us as parents on how we are commanded to discipline our children. And then we looked at the difference between discipline and punishment and how we can apply this to our parenting techniques. I hope and pray that you see the benefits of biblical disciplining of the child in order to raise up men and women of Christ who can be effective leaders of the gospel. Pastor Dennis Finman made a statement in the article we referenced earlier. He said, "I'm afraid of a world where of a world run by adults who were never spanked as a kid and got trophies for participation. It's our job as parents to discipline our kids from a young age. The men and women of tomorrow are the little ones who are running up and down these halls today. So what are we as parents what lasting principles are we going to instill in these young hearts and minds?"